an earlier slide that I had on the screen, I heard in the context of the Sunday morning sermon at the Abbey 3 or 4 weeks ago. It was a poet, I have it written down in my journal, but I couldn't find the line last night, was asked the question, what is life? And his answer was, life is what we pay attention to. And some days I think, wow, that's scary, when I think about some of the things I pay attention to. So in this passage from Matthew, Jesus is inviting his community to think about what they pay attention to. Reading from Matthew 6. Verses 28 to 33. And why do you worry about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not clothed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? Therefore, do not worry, saying, what will we eat, or what will we drink, or what will we wear? For it is the Gentiles who strive for all these things. And indeed, God knows that you need all these things. But strive first for his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. So I'm going to tell you a true story, and I think I've used it once before, and some of you will be familiar with it. But I don't think it ever gets old, or its lesson anyway never gets old. The scene is a Washington, D.C. metro station on a cold January morning, and a man with a violin plays 6 Bach pieces for about 45 minutes. And during that time, approximately 2,000 people pass through the station, most of them on their way to work. At the 3-minute mark, a middle-aged man noticed that there was a musician playing. He slowed his pace and he stopped for a few seconds, and then he hurried on to meet his schedule. At the 4-minute mark, the violinist received his first dollar. A woman threw the money in the hat without stopping and continued to walk. At the 6-minute mark, a young man leaned against the wall to listen to him, then looked at his watch and hurried off. At the 10-minute mark, a 3-year-old boy stopped, but his mother tugged him along hurriedly. The kid stopped to look at the violinist again, but the mother pushed hard and the child continued to walk, turning his head all the time. This action was repeated with several children. Every parent, without exception, forced their children to move on quickly. At the 45-minute mark, the musician was playing continuously, but only 6 people had stopped to listen for a short while. About 20 gave money but continued to walk at their normal pace, and he collected a total of $32. After an hour, he finished playing, and silence took over. No one noticed. No one applauded. There was no recognition whatsoever. No one knew this, but the violinist was Joshua Bell, one of the greatest musicians in the world. He played one of the most intricate pieces ever written with a Stradivarius violin valued at $3.5 million. 2 days before, Joshua Bell sold out a theater in Boston where the price of seats averaged $100. This is a true story, Joshua Bell playing incognito in the metro station, was organized by the Washington Post as part of a social experiment about perception, taste, and people's priorities. The questions raised in a commonplace environment at an inappropriate hour: do we notice beauty? Do we stop to appreciate it? Can we recognize amazing talent when it is in an unexpected context? One possible conclusion reached from this experiment could be this: if we do not have a moment to stop and listen to one of the best musicians in the world playing some of the finest music ever written with one of the most beautiful instruments ever made, what else are we missing? I can imagine Jesus speaking to those in the metro station that day the way he spoke to those who gathered round him on a hill in Palestine. The details would be different, of course, in the middle of the urban jungle, but I think the conclusion might be the same. Why do you worry so much? I can see it in the way you are moving. What is driving you? Are you concerned that you will not get enough to eat today? Do you not have enough clothing in your closet? Because there's something really magnificent happening here and you cannot see it. So the question is, what else can't you see? The word anxious appears 6 times in today's passage. I would venture to guess that 80% of those in the metro station that day had anxiety written all over their face. I've been there. I've lived in the city where there are deadlines to watch and GO trains to catch, and some guy busking in the middle of the path is simply annoying. But I've also lived on a farm where there are no trains to catch, but there are apples to pick and fields to mow and children to transport here and there. And in one of the most glorious regions of this country, I have done all of those things in a spirit of anxiety. Sometimes intense, and other times just floating under the surface. Taking a break until the next challenge presents itself. Anxious. I know what it means to be anxious. Sometimes I can identify exactly what I'm anxious about, and other times it's like it's in the air and it's in my breath. How about you? In this passage, Jesus challenges us to do some deep thinking about our anxiety. And of course, when Jesus wants to challenge people, he simply offers them a question, or in this case, a series of questions. Tell me, he asks, can you add a single hour to the length of your life by worrying about it? Does God not take care of the birds of the air? Look, they're fine. Or what about the wild flowers? How much more does God care for you? And besides, is life not more than food and clothing? Certainly in our culture, those things are guaranteed. But we worry still, don't we? Probably North America is probably under a cloud of an epidemic of anxiety as we speak, and growing as we speak. And so Jesus suggests that we have to reorient ourselves by changing our focus, making an effort to see the mystery we call God in our midst, in our relationships, in our gardens, in our friendships, in music, everywhere. You need to experience the kingdom in those present moments. And when you do, all of those other things you were worried about, well, it might put them in perspective. And it's a discipline. I think it's a spiritual discipline that is particularly challenging in our culture, where there are so many distractions. And apart from what is going on around us, there are usually about 3 or 4 storylines going on in our own heads, not to mention some of the larger storylines going back and forth across the planet right now that distract us from the gifts that are right in front of us. Jesus' remarks, apart from reminding us that at the heart of the mystery is a deep love and compassion, his remarks are meant to reorient our focus. He invites us to focus on the wonder-filled things in our midst, those things we take for granted, like the flower, like the blue jay or the starling. And underlying his suggestion is, take a moment or 2 or 3 or 4 to meditate on these things. And see what happens to all of those storylines that are keeping you up at night. And so the question we need to ask ourselves during this season of Thanksgiving, I think, is this: what captivates us? Or what is holding you captive? Is it the past? Are you stuck in the past? Or is it the future? Are you anxious about how the next day, week, month is going to unfold? Think of those people rushing past the musician in the metro that day, held captive to deadlines and plans and storylines going round and round in their head. And they missed the free gift. I wonder if during this coming week, you can think about or consider the things that keep us grounded in the present moment, whether it is walking your dog or listening to music or working in the garden or getting some exercise. And what does that feel like to just go into that focus on the gift? I confess that when I read the story about this musician in the metro, the last line scares me the most. What else are we missing? I suspect we're missing a great deal. Teachings from the Buddhist tradition remind us of the importance of being awake, of living fully in the present. Buddha means the awakened one. Jesus challenges us to pay attention, to wake up to the gifts in our midst, because life at the end of the day is what we give our attention to. When we are mindful, when we are not captive to a life of anxiety, when we practice seeing in new ways and being captive to the reliability of our breath, our friends, our comforts, the bounty in front of us and around us, particularly on this glorious island, then each moment becomes full of wonder.